Are you tired of feeling like you're starting from zero every month when you do your new financial forecast? Or does it take you 1 or 2 days just to reset your financial models every time you need to use them? Well, there's a better way, and I'm going to show you how in under 30 minutes you can automate your financial models and never have to go through this again. Sound too good to be true? Well, let me tell you that I've helped over 100 finance professionals with this same process, and trust me, it works. Welcome to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Mike. I'm a senior finance leader, and over the last decade, I've done more than 150 planning cycles. And over that time, I've learned a lot of tips and tricks that can help you speed up your modeling time and automate the process so that you can spend the time adding value to the company and not just working in Excel. Stick around because by the end of this video, you're going to know how to automate any financial model you have in under 30 minutes so that it will practically run itself. You'll also learn a few of my favorite Excel hacks that you'll wish you knew sooner. The best part is you can apply all of these hacks and automations to any process you do, not just financial models. If that sounds good, let's get started. Here's how you build an automated financial model in 30 minutes or less. First of all, let's talk about the way we're going to forecast, because this process works the absolute best with a concept called driver-based forecasting. Now, if you're already working in financial models, there's a really good chance that you're already doing driver-based forecasting and maybe just don't know it by that name. But what driver-based forecasting does is it focuses on key factors or the drivers that have the biggest impact on your business outcomes. This is things like sales volume and how they impact your costs. This could be things like labor hours needed to support a certain level of revenue. Forecasting with drivers creates a clear link between these drivers and your financial results. This does two things. First of all, it makes your forecasts more accurate and reliable. And second, and really critically, when you go to do analysis at the end of the forecast cycle, it lets you know exactly why you missed your forecast, because trust me, every forecast is going to be wrong. It's all about doing better every time. So you're going to have a really clear way to understand what happened, explain it to management, and most importantly, provide actionable insights you can come back and change it on. So by identifying the right drivers, you can adjust your plans really fast if something changes, and this can help keep you ahead of the curve. And again, it just lends itself the best to this automated modeling solution because everything comes back to these key drivers of your business. So now let's talk about the tools we can use in Excel for automating this financial model. There's Excel tables. If we use tables, they're going to automatically expand and update as you add data. No worries about missing out. Conditional formatting is going to help you analyze this data in an automated fashion. We'll leverage some Excel macros that can perform repetitive tasks, especially rolling forward your model. And then PowerQuery can help connect and clean raw data from multiple sources and bring it all together. Now, you might be saying, well, I don't think about Excel tables or conditional formatting as automation. I think about things like Excel macros and PowerQuery. But it is automation, because automation is just having the computer do something you would otherwise have to do yourself. If you would have to look for issues in the data, conditional formatting is automating it. If you would have to manually update your reference fields, if data size changes, the Excel table is doing it. That's automation. It's so much easier than a lot of people realize because we're not going to write a single line of code to do this process. Have any questions so far? Go ahead and let me know down in the comments. I'll be more than happy to help you out. I read and respond to every single one. Before you start, it's key to plan out your model. You have to define the purpose of your model, identify the key drivers that will impact your results. I highly encourage you to sketch out the structure of your model on paper before you ever open Excel, and critically keep it simple at first and build from there. You don't need to shove everything in on your first pass. Start small and build out. And then most importantly, think about who will use the model. You have to make it really user-friendly with clear labels, logical flows, and consistent formatting. Don't ever assume that you'll be the only person that will work in the model, because you want to make sure that anybody can open the model and quickly get up to speed. Now let's talk about building your model. Start by organizing your data. Clean it up, remove duplicates, make sure everything is in the right format. Then we're going to use formulas to link our inputs to calculations, and these formulas we're going to want to be static so that everything will just keep working for us. You want to lay out your model in logical sections, starting with your inputs, then your calculations, and then your outputs, and always put these on different tabs to keep it clearly organized. Keep testing your model. Check that the math works, and a great strategy you can use is back testing. Run your model on prior periods where you already have the actual performance and see how the model comes out relative to actuals. It's a great strategy that I really don't see used enough. Also, make sure to add clear labels and formatting throughout the file. Keep everything organized and easy for anybody to pick up and understand. If you're enjoying this video, make sure to subscribe and ring that bell because I don't want you to miss out on a single one of the amazing videos I have coming out. I post a new video every single Monday, and I post short form tips every single day of the week. So that's more than enough talking. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to dive into Excel and build our automated financial model. So the first thing I want to do is introduce you to the organizational system that I use in the model. It's critical to automate that we have a very clear organization system. And what you'll find from left to right is I separate the types of work being done on the sheet. So the first tab we have here is the summary. This is where we're going to be able to look at and analyze the forecast as it's summarized. The model, this is where we'll do any of our actual calculations. Inputs is where we'll put any hard-coded inputs we have. I keep all hard codes on one tab so I know where they are, and I leave explanations for what they are. And then lastly, the forecast data. This is where we're going to pull in the data table that we will use to feed the model. Now, the first skill we want to look at to automate is using PowerQuery to pull in our data. Right now the sheet's blank, so let's go ahead and get some data on it. Now, I am going to show you how to use PowerQuery for this purpose, but I'm not going to go into PowerQuery basics. I've got a great video on that. I will post the link right here so you can go watch that. If you're new to PowerQuery, make sure to check that out before you continue with this process. So let's go ahead and get our data. So we're going to go to the Data tab. We'll get our data, and we're going to get the data from a file. So I've got all of the data sitting in an Excel workbook. We'll go ahead, we'll go to our documents, and we're going to go to our coffee shop data. And let's go ahead and import that file. All right, now I've got two tabs in here. One of them has the general ledger or financial data. One of them has stats like our accounts. So we're going to want to pull in both of these sheets. Now for loading, we're going to load this too. We don't want to pull it into the file because we want to create our own data set. So we just want to create a connection, and we don't want to add this to the data model. We're going to pull it straight into data. And let's go ahead and hit OK. All right, now you'll see that the queries and connections have been formed. Let's go ahead and work with our data set. Now the great thing, and again, all this is explained in my PowerQuery video, but the great thing about this is as we do steps to transform our data, it's going to save all of them and it's going to run them automatically for us every time. So the very first thing that we want to do is we want to look at what we've got going on here. So we've got our dates, we've got our categories, so all of our different accounts, and then we've got what we forecasted and what the actual performance was. On the second one, we've got stats. So again, we have dates, then we have coffee and food transactions, and we have the count. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do, we're focused on forecasting. We're focused on looking forward. So I don't need the forecasted amounts. I just need the actual amounts right now because we're going to use that data to forecast forward. So let's go ahead and remove this column because we don't need it. All right, and then what I want to do is I want to get the stat data into the same data set. I've got coffee transactions and food transactions, and I want to be able to pull them as another count. So what we're going to do is we're going to just change this to say actual. This will stay category and date. Now we want to come and make sure that these headers are the same. So we're going to call this category, and we're going to call this amount. So now PowerQuery will be able to recognize that the columns are the same. And then what we're going to do is we're going to append these queries together. So merging is when we take data sets and we go like this. We look for like a common thing like the date and we join them together to bring in mapping tables, things like that. Appending, we're going to stick them together just into one data set. So let's go ahead and do that. This is going to kind of be top down in the same columns. We want to append this as new, and the new data set is what we're going to load to our file. So we want to pull together our GL data and our stat data, and we're going to stick this together into a brand new data set. All right, and here's our data set. So it's all blended together. You'll see that we now have everything in one file. This is going to be all of our accounts as well. And if I sort this by date, we're going to see that it also has all of our transactions. So here's a transaction count, and then here's all of our revenue and expenses. Let's go ahead and call this forecast data, and then we're going to go and load it into our file. So we want to load this as a table. We want to load it onto an existing worksheet. We're going to pop it right there, hit OK, and then our data is going to pull in. So now every single time if you save the files as these names, PowerQuery is going to go in and it's going to adjust and change your data set for you. We can get a lot more advanced. I really want you to focus in on the basics of just pulling in multiple files together into one data set for your forecasting purposes, but there is so much more you can do to transform, just not really the point of this video. Now, the next thing that's really important when you're automating a forecast is to use Excel tables and named ranges for everything you possibly can. This is going to make your formulas much more reliable because your ranges and tables will adjust automatically and your forecast model will adjust automatically. You see, we already had PowerQuery create a table. We can tell because the table design pops up. We see the table name here is forecast_data. So if I reference forecast_data, any formula I use to reference that will always pull from the entire complete data set that PowerQuery gives us. I could add in an entire another year of data and all the formulas are going to update automatically. Now we're going to use this logic as we start to put in our inputs. Now there's not a ton of inputs that I know we need, but I know we will need inflation. So we're going to go ahead and put that in here. I always like to be very clear. My hard-coded inputs are hard codes, so I color code them orange and blue. There we go. And now we want to name this. So what you want to do to name this is you want to go to Name Manager. We want to define the name, and we're going to define this name as inflation. It was smart enough to pick that up for us. So now if I reference inflation, it's automatically going to pull that in instead of having to go back and reference the cell every time. And we just want to make sure we consistently do this because it's going to make our files just so much easier to use. So now what we want to do is we want to start working with our model. So let's start by looking at the accounts that we need to forecast. We can come back here and we can just lift out our accounts. There we go. And we'll come back to our model. So this is what we need to forecast across the year. And then what we're going to need to do is we're going to want to forecast them for every single day. All right, so there is our full 2024. Now we're also going to want to pull in what month this is and what day of the week it is. So with our month and our day of the week, let's go ahead and type in our month formula and our day formula. All right, and let's turn those in to numbers and drag that all the way across. All right, and then let's just put all of these things in a more logical format. So let's start with our coffee sales. We'll put that on the top. Put our food sales right under that. All right, then we'll go down to our ingredient cost. We'll have our marketing, utilities, labor, rent, that's all good, and we'll pull transactions. Put them right down here at the bottom. All right, so this is going to become our data table. This is what we're going to populate with the model. So then let's go ahead and make sure that we've got that. We're going to make this a table. Okay. And we're going to call this table forecast_output. All right, and then our next goal is to just forecast each one. Now I'm realizing after adding month and day of the week here that we kind of need to do the same thing to our forecast data set so we can look at historical data. And I did not pull that in. So let's go ahead and go back to our PowerQuery and we can make that adjustment real fast. It's the great thing about PowerQuery. If you need changes made, you can just pop it right in, super easy. Okay, so we want to go in here and add a column. Let's go ahead and put in a custom column. We're going to use a formula date.month. We'll reference the date column. There's our new column with that. We'll pull it over here. We'll call this month. And then we're going to do the same thing again to get the day of the week. Date.day of week. And then we will again reference the date column. All right, so now our table's all updated. We'll just go back to home. We'll go ahead and hit load, and it's going to update our forecast data for us. So now we've got dates, months, days, week we can work with. Excellent. All right, and let's come up here. We're going to pop in a summary real quick so we can look at all of the data. So I'm going to insert a pivot table. I want to insert this from, remember we used our nice names before, so we'll go forecast data. And I'm going to pop in a pivot table right there. Excellent. So let's go ahead and we'll pull in the month to the columns. We'll pull in the category down the side. And then we'll pull in our actuals here so we can get all of our counts. We'll clean up this formatting a little bit. And there we go. So this is our performance from last year summarized, and we can just take a really nice quick look at that. If this video is helping you out so far, I'd really appreciate if you hit that like button. It's a small click for you, but it's a huge boost for me in the channel. So now that we've got our data reset, we've got our chart here we can look at, let's go back to the model and start building this out. Where do we need drivers? What I would highly encourage you to do is literally write down what the drivers are. So for coffee sales, it's food transactions and it's rate. For food sales, so for coffee sales, it's coffee transactions and rate. For food sales, it's food transactions and rate. For ingredients cost, it's actually coffee and food sales, because we usually use a percentage, and rate. Marketing, so we can do this a couple of ways. We can look at it as a percent of our revenue or as a fixed amount. In this case, we will look at it as a percentage of our revenue target that we want to spend. So the driver would be revenue. All right, utilities, so these will just be a fixed cost we're going to create an input for. Labor, we're going to base this on the number of transactions we want to serve and how many labor hours it took to serve each transaction. So this is going to be labor hours and rate. And then rent, we're also going to assume this is fixed. Now, for food transactions and coffee transactions, there's a lot of economic drivers, a lot of marketplace drivers you can look at to forecast these. For the purposes of simplifying this analysis, I'm going to use the prior year period with a caveat, the prior year period transactions, and then we're going to look at kind of a long run adjustment for them. So that's going to be the driver. You can get really fancy on these transactions, but the transactions are going to drive it. So we'll just look at prior year historicals. Okay, so let's go through and let's just, you know what, let's just knock out the easy ones first. So rent is fixed. So we're going to call this daily rent. How much did we spend last year? So last year we spent $106,965. So let's say that that's going to go up 3% with our inflation. So our daily rent is going to be 106,945 times 1 plus the inflation rate. And this is now our rent calculation. So that's our rent input, and then we're going to divide that by 365. There's our daily rent. Now, just like we did with inflation, we want to call this daily rent. So let's go to formulas. We'll define name, daily rent. All right, and now we're going to come to daily rent, and we're just going to do equals daily rent. Pull that all the way across. All right, so we've pulled our daily rent all the way across, and then we can just pull it up because rent is now calculated. Amazing. So we're just going to link up our rent. Awesome. We'll take that over, we'll copy it, and our rent is done. How great is that? All right, let's do the same for utilities. So how much did we spend on utilities last year? We spent $107,110. We're going to do the exact same thing we just did for daily rent. Let's take this down. We'll call this daily utilities. I forgot the number already, $107,110. Excellent. Now we'll call this daily utilities, and we're going to do exactly what we just did. I like to just, get a quick win. We're going to just knock out the utilities. All right, just carry this all down. This is going to be utilities, daily utilities, daily utilities. Let's take that all the way over. And then we'll come up here and do the exact same thing. Boom. So we've gotten 2 of our lines forecasted already. Now let's go and actually tackle something a little bit more complicated. So we're going to do our coffee sales and our food sales, but first we need to do our food and our coffee transactions. Okay, so let's start with food transactions. So we're going to start with prior year. So that's going to pull in what we already had. We're going to pull in a trend adjustment, and then any manual adjustments we want to make. Always good in case there's some weird noise in there. And then we're going to have our forecast. So to pull in the prior year, you can't just go to the prior year because it's going to be a different month and it's going to be a different day of the week. So this is where we want to go through and we want to kind of average out the performance from that month and that period. So we're going to do equals sum ifs. Our forecast range is going to be actuals from forecast data. Our criteria range is going to be the day of the week. That's our first one. We'll come back here. Have our day of the week up there. Let's lock that in for future formulas. We'll come back. We're going to have our month. We'll lock that in as well. And then, so that's going to give us the sum. So now what we need to do to create an average is use count ifs for the same period. So for count ifs, we're going to have our criteria range 1. We're actually going to be able to just copy all of this over, everything except the actual range. So let's just copy this right here, pop that in, close it off. So here's our daily transactions from the prior year for the same months and the same day of the week, so we're not overestimating. The next thing we want to do is look to see if there's a trend adjustment. So I want to look at my food transactions. I just want to quickly chart these out, because I want to see if there's any kind of a trend we need to consider. So we're going to insert a line chart, and we want to add a trend line. And it looks like our trend line is actually a little bit negative. We'll go ahead and we'll display the equation. Yeah, so our trend line is actually ticking down a bit. Not great news, but it is what it is, and we have to reflect that in the forecast. So let's come back here, and we're going to do our trend adjustment. Actually, sorry, let me put this over here. We'll do our trend adjustment food, and we're going to have that as down 3%. Do our normal formatting. I'll make this a name. We'll call that food trend. And there we go. So we're going to do the prior year times food trend. There we go. I'm not going to do any manual adjustments because we want to keep this all simple, but now we have our food transactions. We'll go ahead and we will carry that all the way over. So now we're going to do the same thing for coffee transactions, except the difference here is instead of food transactions here, we're going to want to type in coffee, so we pull the correct category. Otherwise, our formula will work great, and then we want to go check the trend. We'll do the same exact thing. And we'll see how the coffee is trending. Looks like we might have exactly the same issue. We'll pop that on a line chart. We'll pop in a trend line. Actually down a little bit worse, about 5%. So we'll come back to our inputs. We're going to do the exact same thing for coffee. So forecast is not looking great already for next year. We'll go to formulas. We'll define this name again, and we will call this trend adjustment coffee. Coffee trend, and we have our new forecast. Pop that all the way over, and there we go. We'll pull this up to our file. All right, we're making progress. We've got 4 of our lines filled out. And again, as you pull in data, all of this is going to update automatically, which is just so cool. So now we want to turn those food and coffee transactions into actual drivers. What we want to look at first, though, is, well, how much money did we make in the prior year? So what was our rate? And what we're going to do for that, so we're going to have our food sales down here. We've already got our food transaction forecast. We need prior year rate. We have inflation, manual adjustments, and that is going to give us our new rate, and that's going to give us our food sales. See, everything is being tied back to drivers, so we can be very thoughtful about our forecast. So first of all, we'll just pull in our food transaction. Inflation's easy, so we'll just do inflation. And we'll multiply that times the prior year rate. We'll sum this up, and then food sales is going to be the rate times the food transaction, and then let's pull in the prior year rate. Let's come up here and steal the first part of our formula. Always like to steal formulas where I can. We'll also need to pull in our revenue so we can divide this. So we'll pop that in there, divide, and then we'll change coffee transactions to coffee sales. And now we have our average rate per transaction. And since we set everything up, we are good to go. Let's go ahead and recreate this same thing for coffee before we do that. Call this coffee, coffee sales, coffee transactions. Let's link coffee transactions up to the correct transactions. Prior year rate, we just want to change everything to coffee. All right, so now we have forecasted the first day of our food sales and our coffee sales. Let's go ahead and drag that over, and we've got ourselves a forecast. Awesome, so now that we've got our food sales and our coffee sales calculated, let's go ahead and bring these up. So here's our coffee sales, here's our food sales, and then we can just bring those all the way across. All right, so all we have left is ingredients cost, marketing, and labor. So next, let's take a look at ingredients cost. So ingredients cost is going to be the ingredients cost as a percentage of revenue from the prior year. Because we've built in inflation to the price, we're not going to need to add inflation. We can literally just take it against the total revenue. So let's go ahead and go and do ingredient cost. So this is going to be cost of sales percent. This is going to be sales, which is simply going to be our coffee sales forecast plus our food sales, and that's going to give us our ingredient cost. So to calculate cost of sales, we will again come up here and we will steal part of our formula. So we're going to come down here, we're going to use this beginning part. This is going to give us all of our coffee sales for the correct periods. Put a plus sign in there. We're going to do this. This is going to be our food sales, double parentheses, and then we are going to divide this by a sum if for our ingredient cost, and this is going to give us our rate. All right, so with that formula, we've got our cost of sales. Our cost of sales was running at 21%. Again, we've built inflation into the revenue, so unless your inflation for food cost is beyond that, we don't need to do anything. It's already there calculating because we're using a percentage. That's one of the reasons this is so simple. We'll go ahead and we'll multiply our percentage, and there is our ingredient cost. And we'll go ahead and, like everything else, we will pull this over. And then once again, we will bring ingredient cost up to our forecast. And with that, we've built an automated forecast. As you pull in new data, it's going to update automatically. And by using this driver-based forecasting along with the power of PowerQuery to clean up your data, you have automated your forecasting process. You don't need to manually collect data anymore. You don't need to manually calculate the forecast. What you can do is spend your time reviewing it and then making kind of those manual adjustments we saw. If you take away just one thing from this video, it's that automation is easy. And in 2025, there's no reason for you to be spending time rebuilding or restarting your models every single month. Let's make these processes run themselves so you can spend time on what really matters, or so you can just get to Taco Tuesday faster. That's all for today. I'll catch you in the next video. Until then, this is Mike signing off from F9 Finance. Cheers.